I had so much fun making our Bluey cake, I decided to make a bingo cake as well. Now it all starts with 3 6-inch cake layers, and I'm building this on an 8-inch cake board. I'm setting the cake layers a little bit off center so that we have room for Bingo's paws, and I'm frosting this with my American buttercream. You can totally use a less sweet frosting like my hybrid buttercream or my Swiss meringue buttercream, but they are a tiny bit harder to color. And once all the cake layers are stacked, we're covering the cake in a thin layer of frosting just to help lock in any crumbs. I like to start with a large offset spatula just to get the frosting spread everywhere, and then I smooth it out with a bench scraper and also an acetate sheet. And the acetate sheet just comes in handy with getting kind of a curved edge at the top of the cake. We then pop it into the fridge to chill for about 30 minutes until the frosting is firm to the touch, and while it chills, we color the frosting. Now, color matching frosting always takes a bit of time. I used chocolate brown and orange gel food coloring to create these shades, and to get the really deep orange, I ended up having to use the microwave method where you scoop out a little bit of the frosting, heat it up in the microwave for like 10 to 15 seconds until it's liquid. You want to keep an eye on it because it can bubble over. Then you pour it back into your frosting and mix it in until it's nice and rich in color. Do keep in mind that the microwave method will make the frosting a bit thinner initially, but it will thicken up as it cools down. And then to make the super light orange, I actually just added the tiniest bit of the deep orange buttercream to white buttercream, which created a really cohesive look. Each color of frosting goes in its own piping bag with a large round piping tip. I used a variety of tips that I just had on hand, but you can use whatever you have, or you can also just cut openings at the bottom of the bags. And once all the frosting was colored, we tackle the cake decorating Rice Krispies. These are really just Rice Krispie treats without any butter, so it helps give them a bit more stability and helps them keep their shape. To make the ears, I grabbed out 2 equal-sized bits of cake decorating Rice Krispies, really smashed them down, and then I used my hands to shape them into triangles. Now, you want the triangles to be a bit taller than they are wide. The long sides of the triangles, I believe, were about 2.5 inches, and the bottom of the triangles was about 2 inches across. And then before they fully firm up, you want to insert bamboo skewers or toothpicks into them just to help set them on top of the cake. And then we're also making Bingo's snout with Rice Krispies. This is about 2 inches long, and you want it just to be kind of like an oval that's a little bit tapered. After holding up the ears to the cake, I realized they were a little bit too big, so I trimmed them down with a knife, and this also helps give them sharper edges. And then I traced out where I wanted Bingo's face to go. And then it was time to actually frost the cake. So we're covering the top half with our deepest orange buttercream. I used kind of a small piping tip for this, and I almost wish I had done a larger piping tip, but this does allow you to have better control over how much frosting you're actually putting on the cake, and I think it helps you use less frosting. I then smoothed it out first with my small offset spatula and then with my acetate sheet. On character cakes like these, acetate sheets are so helpful. You can buy them in a pack on Amazon for like $8. They come in squares that are about 1 foot by 1 foot, and then you can just cut it down with scissors to a size that fits easily in your hand and is easy to use. They really make it so much easier to smooth the frosting, and also you can wipe them off and reuse them, so it really is just such a great tool. After covering the bottom half of the cake in our medium orange frosting, I started adding on the stripe between Bingo's eyes with the same color, only to realize later that it's actually supposed to be the lightest kind of tan colored frosting, so keep that in mind if you are making this at home. Then we add on Bingo's eyes and little tummy, and after getting those nice and smooth with our acetate sheet, we use our black buttercream to pipe on Bingo's pupils. Now, you want to take your time as you do this, and using a large piping tip is super helpful. I also recommend adding a toothpick to the back of the snout just to help prevent it from sliding down the cake. This is the point in time where I realized that that stripe was the wrong color, so I went in and kind of fixed the edges where I had to scrape it away, and then I used the light tan frosting to fill it back in. I wanted to include this bit because if you run into any bits where you're not quite happy with how it turned out, always remember you can scrape it off and try again. I also ended up doing this with one of Bingo's eyebrows, so don't worry if you feel like you have to do the same. Now, because this piping tip was so big, I ended up adding a ton of buttercream there, and I really had to smooth it down to get it to look more flush with the dark orange frosting. Then I used the black buttercream to add on Bingo's nose, and I used a scribe, but you could also use a toothpick just to carve a little smile into the side of her snout. And then the next step is to work on Bingo's ears. So we're gently pressing our Rice Krispie treats into place and making sure they're positioned nice and even and kind of halfway back on the head. We're using the medium orange buttercream to color the inside, and then that deep orange buttercream around the edges and the back. And then we're also using the medium orange to pipe on Bluey's legs and the lightest orange to pipe on Bluey's paws. And this is why I used such a large piping tip for the tan colored buttercream here, just because it makes adding the paws on so much easier. Then I used our acetate sheet just to kind of scoop up the edges of the paws to make them look like the bottom of her feet. And I also used a scribe to carve little toes into both the paws, I guess like the hands and the feet. And while these may not be true to scale for Bingo, it's a great way to add legs on to the cake and keep them within the cake board. And the last step is just to add on Bingo's eyebrows. Now, these are a little bit stressful because in real life, they float kind of above her head, but by doing them kind of right at the top edge of the cake, I think it looks like they're in the right place. And after smoothing that out, Bingo is all ready to go. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. The full recipe with step-by-step pictures is also up on Chelsweets.com, and the link is included in the description below. And until next time, happy baking!